Hello, everyone. I'm Nolan Myers, CEO of WGTP. We're building an end-to-end platform for cities to connect with residents, grow their economies, and deliver responsive public services. I'm here to give a sprint update for March 18th. And we had, as always, I'm going to go through goals from last sprint, progress against those goals, and what we hope to accomplish in the next sprint. Top line goals for the last sprint were to get to 76 weekly active users on a rolling average. And we had four things that we wanted to do during the sprint. Recruiting and bring on head of engineering, go to Africa for the Charter Cities Conference, align our support processes with Inkwashi, our customer, and flesh out product features for gate registration and in-app messaging. Overall progress against those goals, I'll share my screen here. This is our weekly active user chart over the last couple of months. And overall progress against goal was 108 against a goal of 76. On the Africa trip, we ended up not going to Africa because of coronavirus. It was a prudent decision by the conference organizers to discontinue that because shortly thereafter, it became very clear that coronavirus was a global pandemic. We, like all organizations, wanted to make sure that we responded well to that. And so I worked with the team to make sure that we had a few priorities clear about what we wanted to do, and made quite a lot of adjustments to our sort of work habits in order to be able to do that. The priorities that we talked about were, number one, to be to make sure we had our own health and safety taken care of. The team in the US, I think, hit it a little bit earlier in terms of the curve than the team in Zambia. And so we wanted to make sure that the team in Zambia, while there were still supplies around, had the opportunity to go and get the supplies to take care of themselves. So we outlined what those would be. Second priority was to make sure we had business continuity, and there was a lot of work here to make sure that people had home offices and had supplies there. The two biggest issues that we spent time on in this sprint were making sure that people had power stores, or people will have power stores at home, and good access to the internet. People in the Zambian office have, or people in our team in Zambia has been working from the office there, and so getting home offices set up is a bit of a project, and still a little bit work in progress. And third is to help our customer, and to help all of our customers. I think it has become very clear with this that cities are on the front line of responding to public health emergencies like this, and thinking about what we can do in Zambia with our existing customer and what products we might be able to offer to future customers is something that we had a good deal of thoughts on, and I'll come back to later in the spring. The second or third goal was around recruiting, and just making sure that we brought Nicolas on board. So I'm very happy to announce that we have a head of engineering that started last Monday. And I'm just thrilled that he's already fixing bugs and running our daily stand-ups and creating much clearer user stories. So I'll show a little bit of how we've standardized on our stories there. Now, with each story that we put together, we have a sentence structure that we use. So here in this case, I'm showing, as a client, I want to see the history of my messages so that I can go back and refer to it. And this has a few important parts. It has who the story is for, what it is that the feature is going to cover, a history of messages, and the reason why they want to cover those features. Nicolas has also been great about making sure that we have getting us to have acceptance criteria on each of our stories, so that we can focus first on the testing and have a good testing framework in place, and then go and implement the feature. I think it's also going to prevent a lot of rework and make sure that we have clearer lines of communication between product and engineering. And then the other product area that we spent a lot of time in, Nicolas is actually very instrumental in helping us to focus our product efforts. I think when we started out the sprint, we were thinking about a feature that was along the lines of progress updates, something the marketing team could use to broadcast messages. Nicolas led us through a product brainstorming session with myself and Jay to really hone in on what that was, and what we were trying to accomplish with that. And as we got into it, we realized that that we wanted to really focus the initial version of the feature on just the basics of getting in-app communication up and running. So this is a feature that we've fleshed out now to, I'll show you some screenshots. The idea here is that on the front end, it looks a lot like a chat application so that a client can go in and initiate a request of the city, but it also functions a little bit like a chat with an acknowledgement or with a response. Here we're using a thumbs up, thumbs down metaphor, and an ability to archive, so that the client has something that has a bit of a workflow that says this ticket has been closed or this thread has been closed and the city has done what it is that I requested, and can give feedback at the end to say, yes, this was good or not good according to what I was looking for. So on the client side, a relatively simple messaging protocol will send out a text when a message goes to a client and give them a URL that they can then go and receive this. This is fleshing out here. This screen is showing what it would look like when a client has a longer message. So if they tap the three buttons here, they'll then, the ellipsis, sorry on this one, they'll come into a screen that has more of a flow, has the full history of the message. And here we want to have something where it is somewhere in between email and a chat and an Asana ticket. These are sort of the inspirations so that it looks like they can see multiple people collaborating on the same ticket. So for here, in this case, we're illustrating the idea that a client is initiating a request with the city. And then Mutali responds and Venia responds a little bit later after that. It gets a little bit more interesting on the back end, where we wanted to build around some of the functionality we have with notes and to-dos and integrate our support processes. So on the back end, we want to mimic the idea of a support desk. So the inbox resembles a to-do list, and where as an administrator, I can come in and I can see all of the open to-dos that I still have left, or the open messages that are active with clients. And when they're done, I can click a checkbox and say, yes, this has been completed, and there's no more action required. Where it really gets most interesting is when we integrate the communication between multiple administrators on the back end. So here we're illustrating a ticket where let's say that a client kicked off a request to the city, and then somebody from the city administration responded directly to the client. But then on the back end, there's a little bit of workflow that needs to take place where two different client administrators may need to coordinate to deliver some response back to that client. And then finally, one of them does respond back to the client, and that goes back to them. So the metaphor that we're using here is that the left side of the screen are client visible communications, and the right side, the ones that have boxes around it, are communications that are just administrator to an administrator and focused on the coordination required to serve that client or to make sure that that issue is well handled. So that is the work that we did on fleshing out that feature, and that's something that we plan to roll out in the next sprint. A couple of other things then in terms of progress on the sprint. We made a lot of advancement in terms of documenting our security protocols with our customer, and making sure that we have the documentation in place where we can build training plans around it, and just make sure that we're focusing on the same things and we're running the same process, especially between the sales, the guardhouse, and support on our side. And then there's a few other updates on partners that Jay will take you through, but we had a really great conversation with a potential partner who started the conversation around the idea of building a launch rock for cities. But as we got into the use cases more, we started exploring ideas around business registration. So that'll be our goal for next sprint, is to flesh out what a business registration process looks like, where a company might want to register with the city, and the city then can take care of all of the forms that need to be done to register that business with the state, but provide an electronic front end and a paper-based back end that the city will then handle with the state. Regarding the ideas for coronavirus, the other thing that we've been thinking about is, as we're thinking about cities' responsibilities or the opportunity that they have to do a great job with emergency management or emergency response. We were thinking that we might be able to take some of these features that we fleshed out around in-app communication and leverage the value proposition of having an acknowledged communication and see if that might be valuable in an emergency situation where a city or some smaller community within a city has a list of people that they know that they want to stay in touch with. They can send out a broadcast alert and see who has read that alert, ask for acknowledgement on the alert and say, yes, I'm okay, or no, I need some help. Or even if they just don't respond, then the city can follow up with another alert or another ping of people who didn't respond to the first alert and say, hey, we're just checking back because we didn't actually hear from you. So we want to flesh that out also in the next sprint and see if there's some way that we might be able to help. There may be relevance to coronavirus, but there's certainly relevance to other kinds of things that cities have to deal with, like tsunamis or hurricanes or tornadoes. There are all sorts of reasons why cities might need to or might want to check up on people that are living in the city and have a list and a way of being able to sort of know that people are safe and taken care of. Following back on the goals, we had intended in the sprint also to flesh out a gate registration process, and we did not get to do that, process. So we'll come back to that one in the next sprint. So for goals for the next sprint, our weekly active user target that we're aiming for is 84. And so we'll think about that as the average over 3 weeks, so starting this week and the next 2. And we want to roll out, the first goal within that is to roll out the in-app messaging with Support Desk. We think this is going to give us an opportunity to coordinate, to have people who are already registered in the app have a reason to come back in. So that could be, we have a lot of support that's going on a daily basis that right now is taking place outside of the app. So I think this will both help us do a better job of getting of coordinating for those users or for those clients, but also a way that we can help them come back to the app more frequently and use that as their portal to the city and get into the habit of using it for the city. On the product development front, we want to, our goals are to flesh out an MVP for business registration to coordinate with that partner, and an MVP around acknowledged alerts. If we have time, we'll also come back to the gate registration. We don't know of a specific urgent case around that at the moment, and so registering visitors to come to the gate. And so I think that can wait for another sprint if need be. And finally, more hiring and recruiting. We have a few candidates that we are talking with that are in the pipeline, and want to follow up and get them interviewed and see if they're a good fit and make an offer if so. So that's it for this sprint update. Thank you very much, and I'll see you again in a couple of weeks.